by the elected officials. We have that before us to make, and it is our responsibility to make it. You may not agree with our judgment call. I understand.
All I'm saying is you need to justify why the master plan is requesting a maximum be of 5, and so that you choose to go, you choose that you see no problem with 7.38.
Yes. If we make that determination, we would provide our,
that's all.
yeah. Yes, you're right. Very good.
Mr. Carter, can I ask you to, since you so eloquently put all that, I do think you're missing one point though. What are the community resources that are being required to support a area that you will allow to be, say that one parcel has a 46% open space, but you will not allow a community or a neighborhood to say that the yards are not considered part of it, and that you only have 15% open space, because the legal and technical term is open space is community area versus a private lot. So I think that the Planning Commission respectfully needs to consider what are the resources that are going to be required when there is an ambulance that has to be there, because we know that there's, and again, if you have those numbers, that's great. I would just like somebody to point them out.
Mr. Markle,
and I apologize.
Well, I appreciate the question. I allowed it. It's out of order, as you know. We've had that discussion before, and you knew that before you started. The impact on the resource, but I allowed it anyway.
I appreciate that.
The impact on resources contemplated by the township in terms of the higher density is a factor that we have to consider. It is taken into account under this proposal. So I'll just leave it at that without getting into too much detail. I need to move this along. Mr. Walker had mentioned he visited an Alma, Michigan retirement community. I noted a couple things about that. That community is 65 acres, this one is 42 acres. That makes about a 50% increase. I also noted that it was 200 nursing care residents out of the 500 or so residents, so that 40% of the residents in there are nursing care, which obviously would require a higher number of employees. When you combine the size of that facility with 65 acres versus 40 acres with the number of residents in there, particularly those in nursing care, I don't know that I see the apple-to-apple comparison, but the other commissioners may have a different point of view on that. The comment that it is a business and that's how that person characterized it, I think that's one of the things we have on our plate. If we ever get around to being able to discuss the items from a planning commission perspective, as opposed to in a public forum context. Timeline of proposal related events. There is no such thing. There is nor can there be such a thing. We have a proposal on the table. The proposal has changed slightly each month that we've come back here and looked at. I think it's changed in large part based on input from the public. It's changed in part based on comments, recommendations, questions, and input from the Planning Commission and from the Township consultant, Mr. Nix. But it has changed. But to put it in perspective, at any given point in time, it could have been 2 months ago, it could have been 5 months ago, it could be tonight, it could be next month, I don't know. There could be a proposal on the table, a motion on the table brought by one of the members of this Planning Commission to either approve, recommend approval, or recommend denial. It could happen at any time. There is no timeline on when that is, that we can put on our calendars as to when that's going to happen. Whatever is proposed by way of motion, if it got support for the motion, there would be a vote on the motion. And we could be done with it, whatever motion that was. And it could happen tonight or it could happen sometime in the future. The only thing we know for certain is it can't happen in the past. Susan had mentioned the traffic study does not address ambulance runs. I think we've already talked about that. It does. Granted, it is higher if it's a nursing care. It may even be higher than if it's a retirement community. We've already addressed that point. John DeAngelo said that the most traffic occurs at Adams and Silverville and Adams and Dutton. I did see something about those numbers. Somebody had forwarded to me. I apologize. I'm not a regular reader of the patch. But somebody did forward to me something about a traffic study, and I noted some interesting statistics. And we all know well, I don't even know if I know it now. What's the adage that statistics? Yeah, something like that. I don't even know what it is. But my point is that, yes, we understand the impact, we understand the importance of that traffic that intersection from a traffic perspective. It is a heavily traveled area. We've talked about it every month since we started this project. Mr. Cerna said step back and study what we really want. Unfortunately, as time moves on here, we don't know when these proposals are coming in. I believe that this particular area was earmarked long before 6 years ago in the master plan as an area for that we would expect to see a retirement community sometime in the future, regardless of who the builder is. And we have 3 areas, and there could be 3 developers, or Mr. Boucheri could have enjoyed this process so much he may want to bring 2 more proposals for the other 2 areas. I don't know. We don't have any control over that. It comes when it comes. We do it when we do it, and we keep things moving, which is what I would like to do now. I think I hit them all. Did I miss anything, commissioners? Mr. Nix? Yeah, go ahead.
On the timeline question,
Yes.
it might have been also pertinent to mention that if this project were approved, the applicant is under a timeline to start. I thought maybe that's what the question related to.
Not the question was with regard to our process, but that's a good point.
Yeah.
Maybe I can provide some clarity there. What happens from here? We're going to make a recommendation at some point. I don't know when. We're going to make a recommendation to the Township Board. Then they begin their process. Their process, I believe, includes a public hearing. Well, you know, you're on the Township Board, and other analysis and so forth. I have no idea how long that process is. Assuming that we went to the Township Board with a recommendation for approval, they would begin their process for consideration, and they would make some determination. We have no control over that, other than we made a recommendation. If they approve it, it would then come back to us. But as Janine pointed out, there is a timeline that starts ticking upon receipt of approval by the Township Board. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that timeline is for 2 years? 2 years. 2 years from that date. So yes, I guess there is a timeline question. I didn't interpret the question to be what the applicant's timeline would be. But good to clarify that. Thank you, Janine. Any other points on the public input that's been going on for an hour? You get that, Mr. Langlois? And I'm surprised you didn't jump in there with something. I expected it.
One thing I think that Frank,
Thank you.
I think one thing, Mr. Chairman, that Frank mentioned, and I don't think you got that, he brought up something that I have been concerned about too, about what is going to be rentals and what's going to be private ownerships. Like, you know, I'm just guessing because of my experience with Bellbrook that their apartments are rentals, but their condos are ones that are purchased. I just wondered, that was one of the things that Frank had brought up, and I would like that addressed later on when the time is appropriate for that.
Well, that time, I believe, is appropriate now, although I think I need to mention one more. I don't recall if I did this. There was, I saw when we were playing around here. I did make note of 4 things that that I thought were still, oh, I did mention it, I'm sorry. Never mind. I think I started this an hour ago before opening it up to public comment with the point that I felt like there were still 4 items outstanding for the commissioners to discuss them and get settled on. One of them is this question and its relevance of the rental versus ownership, Barbara, so thank you.
Okay.
Traffic is another, character is a third, and PRRO is a fourth. Now that we've had the additional input from the citizens, is there anything that the commissioners feel we need to add to that list, or are those the 4 issues that we still need to get comfortable with here on this project? Okay, hearing no other feedback other than Mr. Folkraz, let's begin with that. Let's ask this question of, I'm not taking these names in particular order, so I got them written down, the rental question. This is a proposed residential development. There has been a lot of discussion about whether it is a business, whether it is a for-profit enterprise by the developer. And on a certain level, I have a little difficulty with that because I gotta believe that every development of housing is a business enterprise. I don't think that Mr. Mosheri has all of a sudden gotten into a for-profit business scenario with this proposal. I think all of his developments have been for-profit, at least that was the intent. My businesses have been well, the intent was for-profit, it may have been non-profit, but that wasn't, they weren't set up that way. But isn't it all for-profit? Isn't it all a business?
Well, I think even more importantly, as we've identified in the master plan, it addresses a need. And whether it's rental or owned, who cares? That there's really no difference. It fulfills the need of the community as identified long ago in the master plan. And this is one of 3 sites, the only site of the 3 that has sewer and water.
Is it in the purview of the planning commission to consider the distinction between the distinction of ownership of these units? It's a residential use of land, right?
Yes, and I think that it would only be within our purview if there was something about the nature of this that would impact the natural features, the traffic, the infrastructure, the resources used, that having these units, some of them as rentals or leases, would be a different impact on those things as if they were owner occupied. And I haven't heard anybody bring anything to our attention that says that an owner-occupied unit in one of these buildings would be less of an impact than a rented unit.
Isn't that when someone asks to have an assessor?
Or what about pride of ownership? If you own a property as opposed to renting a property, there's clearly...
We've had an hour of public input.
Yes.
As we've had every month, we've had some level of public input. Not always an hour, sometimes much longer. We're done with that now. This is the discussion for the planning commission. If you would like to be a member of the planning commission, the person you want to speak to is sitting right there, and she can put your name on file and consideration. There might even be some people willing to give their seat. Figure out how to make it to that door, you might have this one. But until that happens, that's the discussion is now for the planning commission.
Well, I guess the reason I bring that up is that I feel that if you own something, in most cases, you're going to take better care of it than if you rent. Now, I know these aren't going to be, if this went through, this is not going to be a slum sort of thing where you're going to get people that are going to be Section 8 or something where this is going to be first quality, so that if they were rentals, they would be a high type of rent. So you're going to get a class of people that would take care of the things. But I just would like, I guess, wonder what the applicant plans on doing. I can see where the apartments would be rentals, but as I say, my experience with Bellbrook, the condos, the people bought those. And, you know, some of them made money when they sold them, some of them lost money when they sold them. And there was an age limit, of course, and so forth. So there were no children involved in them.